Neo-colonialism is the use of economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially former dependencies. It is a type of financial imperialism in which more developed countries and multinational corporations exploit the abundance of natural resources in the less developed world. Neocolonialism is most seen today in Africa. The World Bank estimates that 65% of Africa's best arable land is still controlled by white settlers or multinational corporations. And according to a recent UN Africa Progress Report, Africa loses $63 billion each year through foreign multinational corporations, illegal tax evasion, and exploitative practices. This figure surpasses all the money coming into the continent through Western aid and investment. Financial imperialism involves Western capitals using the International Monetary Fund and World Bank to overburden African economies with debt and force their governments to enact counter-developmental policies, such as privatization and structural adjustment, that put the interests of foreign capital over local labor. The effects of neocolonization are a lack of African control over wealth, land, and resources, which ultimately hurt the economies of African nations while profiting multinational corporations in the more developed world. Neo-colonialism allows poverty to thrive by robbing the African nations of the economic profit from their resources, which causes development to stagnate.
One of the earliest examples of neo-colonization is during the expansion of the Roman Empire. The Romans would use the people they conquered as slaves in agriculture and industry such as milling and mining. They would use the precious metals of the lands they conquered in exchange for goods from Han China for economic gain.
Another example of neo-colonization is during the Abbasid Empire's expansion. Along with the use of cultural domination by the spread of Islam, the Abbasids taxed the non-Muslims they controlled as a way of economic profit and coercion into the converting people on the lands they conquered. The Abbasids also used the lands they conquered for gold, silver, copper, and iron, and used them in trade.
In the early modern era, the Portuguese and other European powers established trading posts on the East African coast, such as the trading cities of Kilwa and Mombasa, or the Dutch in South Africa. The Europeans' imperialism allowed them to greatly increase economic profit by trading with wealthy African emperors and other Asian countries through the Indian Ocean. This increased the distribution of African slaves and exerted European dominance within Africa.
After the Industrial Revolution spread throughout Europe, the need for raw materials increased as they could be used for industrialized products. The Europeans were able to use their colonial power and military technology to force many native people and African slaves to work on sugar, rubber, and palm oil plantations, as well as work in mines for the extraction of silver. The raw materials were brought back to Europe to be made into industrialized products to sell to consumers, which boosted European economies, while the Latin American colonies were used solely for their raw materials.
The scramble for Africa was another example of neo-colonization by European powers. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, various European powers invaded and annexed African lands in the name of economic profit. In 1870, only 10% of Africa was under European control, and by 1914, 90% of the continent was under European control. The partition of Africa was important because it balanced power between European nations. The Europeans used the African lands for their resources and often exploited the native people, such as in the Congo, where Belgium set up rubber plantations with African laborers. The boundaries drawn by the Europeans and the economic dependencies created are still very prevalent today. The borders of African nations set up by Europeans ignored ethnic rivalries, which is the cause of violence and genocide today. The economic dependencies set up because of the Europeans using the African countries for raw materials allows many European powers to still exert economic dominance over the African lands they claimed even to this day.
The East India Company played a part in the neo-colonization of India. As the joint stock company established more and more trade relations within India, the company's power over the region slowly started to grow again in the name of economic profit. This paved the way for India to be officially colonized by Britain and the land to be used for its native laborers, resources, and trading opportunities.
The United Fruit Company played a part in the neo-colonization of Latin America as the company began to claim more and more land for the growth of agricultural products. This took away land control from Latin American governments and as a result damaged their economies while benefiting the United Fruit Company.
Another example of neo-colonial resource exploitation in Africa is the diamond industry. Africa produces the bulk of the world market for rough diamonds, which is currently valued at $19 billion annually, while the retail diamond jewelry industry based in Europe is estimated to be worth $90 billion. A rough diamond mine in Africa costs about $40 per carat, and a diamond cut and polished in Europe increases to $400 per carat. That price increases to $900 per carat when it reaches the consumer. The value chain of the diamond industry includes exploration, mining, sorting, polishing, dealing, jewelry manufacturing, and ultimately retail. Africa is able to conduct the first three stages, but Western multinational corporations do their utmost to systematically prohibit African nations from mastering the other four value addition stages.
Zimbabwe is known for producing the best quality tobacco in the world, and in the last year it earned $650 million from the sale of raw tobacco. Industry experts illustrate how Zimbabwe could have earned $6.5 billion instead of $650 million if they had processed the tobacco into cigarettes rather than exporting tobacco as a raw good. The nation earned on average $3.50 per kilogram of raw tobacco, but could have achieved $7.30 per kilogram had the tobacco leaf been threshed and processed into cut rag. If Zimbabwe had further processed the tobacco into cigarettes, it would have earned between $30 and $60 per kilogram.
Nigeria is the African continent's largest oil producer. At least $400 billion of oil revenue has been stolen or misspent by Western multinationals since independence in 1960, according to estimates by the former World Bank Vice President for Africa. That is 12 times the country's national budget for 2014. If it weren't for these multinational corporations exploiting Africa's natural resources, Nigeria would be a very wealthy nation with a decent standard of living for its people. Yet instead, 90% of Nigerian people live on less than $2 per day. The best world leader to help solve this problem is Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. He could create laws that are more lenient on the African nations who are in debt to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which would grant African nations more autonomy since the World Bank and IMF control most African currencies, determine economic policy, and national budgets. This would be the first step in allowing African nations to manage their own economies for development. Ban Ki-moon should take steps to reduce corruption within the World Bank and instead use its loans to promote mineral refinement capacity and other natural resource refinement capacity in Africa, which would give African nations the industrialized economic advantage they need to greatly increase profit from their natural resources such as diamonds, tobacco, and oil.